And I guess from there, your next move was to move to France. It sounds like you had a good opportunity to go over there and play for a big team, but with that came losing the ability to be selected for the All Blacks. So how much of a consideration was that, and what sort of made or break that deal?
Yeah, it was quite tough. Like, I don't really, at that time, like, I was only 26, and that was super young to, like, most players, the idea was like you played in New Zealand in your 20s, and then maybe in your like 30s you'd go overseas for a couple of years and make a bit of money. And so but I felt like I was always really excited to go and play overseas. Like, I wanted to experience something else. I felt like I was almost a bit like stale where I was. And especially for me, like, I grew up in Christchurch, played for Canterbury, played for the Crusaders. My life was the same. All I knew was Christchurch. I'd never experienced anything else. And I almost felt like I was kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of sick of it. Like, I was tired of the same season rolling around. Like, not that I'd only played like 4 or 5 seasons, but it just felt like I needed something new. And then, like, I was playing well, but not like, I wasn't involved in the 2015 World Cup. And then, like, I know that, like, I had like the contract to stay, but I was like, why don't we just look and see what's available around the world? And I asked my agent to have a look. They came back, and I was like, man, first of all, the money it's awesome. Like, that's a big, like, I can really set myself up, for life. And also the experience. I was like, I really wanted to go to France, and then we had an offer from France, and I was like, awesome. Like, I'm really excited. Like, that excites me. It didn't excite me to stay and play Super Rugby again and Canterbury again, and then like just try for I was kind of like always on the fringe of the All Blacks, like kind of getting called in, not making it. And not to say that I wasn't like, I didn't want to like, you could say, I didn't want to fight it out, and stay there. But I was kind of like the mindset, well, like, I've got an opportunity now to make the most of my, me as a rugby player and set myself up now. I've achieved my goal to be an All Black, but and sure, I didn't achieve. I wanted to be like a great All Black. That was my original vision. But I was like, I need to also see this as like a way to set myself up, and at the same time get an opportunity to travel the world, which excites me. Like, that excites me to play in a different team. So I decided to do it. It was hard because at the same time there was another guy that was leaving as well, and there was a bit of pressure in New Zealand to, like, they were losing young talent, so like people didn't want me to go, but I was like, I'm going. I just want to. I felt like I needed to. And looking back, it was ultimately the best thing I've ever done, was that move overseas. Like, I just completely grew up. Like, I left the nest finally, like Christchurch. Like, having the supportive family and everything is great, but like when you really go overseas, you're all alone, and you got to fight your own battles. You got to do your own stuff. You got to, work through the ups and downs by yourself. When I look back in my time in New Zealand, I was just so consumed by rugby that it took up my whole life. Like, the off season, I didn't even switch off. It was all about like preparing for the next season, and all everyone talks about is rugby. And I don't want to do anything on my day off because I want to recover because I got rugby in the weekend. So my whole life was just like rugby, and I didn't really know that until I left. And then I went to France, and like, but you'd have a day off and no one's talking about rugby, and we're going out for dinner tonight, who wants to come? And you know, I was like, all these, like, it was like rugby. Yeah, sure, rugby's your job, and it's important, but we have a life outside of rugby as well. And I kind of like realized, oh man, there's this balance that I've never even given myself. So and that really helped me as a person and as a player, just to have a balance in life. Like, I didn't even know it existed, because in New Zealand, it's just everything. Like, and you feel like if you're not doing that, you're doing a disservice to your teammates and the public and the fans and the, like all of these things. There are people that are relying on you. Whereas like, I went to France and everyone's like, oh, we're going out, we're having a team dinner, we're having like, after the match, it was just like having lots of fun and. It was like this whole other world, and I was like, man. And people were going away on holidays, like, just to like, and just like, it was just, if there was a week off, like in New Zealand, if there was a week off, like, it was almost like, hey, just be careful. We don't want to, don't do anything too much because we've got a game like next week. So let's just, not do anything silly. Like, don't go surfing because you might get injured, or don't do this because you might like put pressure on yourself. So it felt like that. Whether it was really, I don't know. At that time, I felt like just like a prison almost. And then when I went overseas, they were like, oh, if you get 3 days off, like we can go to a different country. I was like, this is awesome. Like people just like, and sure, you train just as hard and you put in just as much effort, but having that balance really, like, I was like, this is a new lease of life. Like I can really enjoy rugby like this. Whereas I was starting to really hate rugby in New Zealand, and that was pushing me overseas.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess it sounds like it was a really positive move, but did moving to France as an All Black and the expectation that comes with that, did that affect you at all, or did you take it all in your stride, or was there not that high expectation over there? They're a bit more relaxed, the crowds? And
oh no, like where I went is super competitive. Like they expect you to be like what they're paying you for. Like, and that was what was different. Like in New Zealand, you kind of felt like, if you had a bad game or whatever, like no one's going to like chew your head off. Like, that happens. Like really understanding. You're really well supported in New Zealand. Whereas like when I went to France and they're paying you big money, if you're not performing, like why did we sign you? Like they're coming out in the newspapers saying stuff about you. Like,
is that because you were like a marquee signing, or is that just for
everyone? I wasn't even at the time. Like I wasn't even like, I went to Toulon. So Toulon was like where all the superstars went like before me. So I wasn't even like the marquee signing. I was just like a mediocre player. Like, and compared to like, I had all these, like I walked into the team and I was like, this is like swear to God, like a World 15 team. Like all these players are like people I watched on TV growing up, best players. Like, and I was like, and then before me, that was Johnny Wilkinson's club, so he was like the original like superstar. So everyone they compared was like, if you're not as good as Johnny, then why are you here? So a lot of pressure, and I was still like, I was only 26, so I wasn't really like, I'd approach it very differently now. Like I'd feel way more comfortable. When I went over there, I was kind of like naive. I didn't really know what to expect. I was just like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to give it my all. But I learned a lot. It was so different. Like just being under that, like I've actually felt under just as much pressure as like more pressure than in New Zealand. Like because you were being paid, there was like you have to perform. And whereas New Zealand, like say if you missed a kick in New Zealand, like no one even cared about kicking. Like goal kicking in New Zealand was sort of like, oh, Dan Carter's really like, he's awesome. If you kick about 80%, 75%, like it's all good, it's fine. No one even like put pressure on you. Like if you had a bad game in New Zealand of kicking, say, I don't even think a coach would talk to me. Like they would just be like, oh, well, you had a bad game, like whatever, try again next week. In France, if you missed one kick, they would be like, and if you lost the game, if you made that kick, we would have won. Like they'd put things like the kicking, if you weren't at 90 to 100%, it was like you weren't a good kicker. So all of a sudden my expectation was like, I had to change the whole way I thought about the game. Like it was kind of like, that was what I found the most difficult. It basically took me like a whole season to understand what was important like how to play the game differently to New Zealand. It was like a completely different style. I wasn't really prepared for that, so I had to learn the hard way sometimes. And you don't have the coaching was sort of like not as supportive, maybe, like more like direct. It was just different personalities. Like they kind of would just say it how it is. Whereas in New Zealand, you kind of like put your arm around you and say, hey, things aren't going very well, but like it's all right. We're going to get back on track. In France, it was like, you're not playing for 3 months. Like you're on the bench. We're not talking to you for 3 months. And I was like watching this happen around me, but like then sometimes being a bit of part of it. And like, it was just this whirlwind of like understanding a different culture, not really being able to speak the language too was difficult. And then everyone thinks that you're gonna just like solve all the problems by just being in the team, but in New Zealand that's not how the game works. The game's all about like, you know, a group of players like, you know, working together with a plan. And where I was at Toulon at the time, there wasn't like much of a plan. It was very like, okay, well, if we just get a good group of players together, like you'll figure it out. And it doesn't always like work like that, like because if everyone's on a different page, it doesn't always. It's difficult. There's 15 guys, like you got to work together and have. So it was very strange, like super strange environment. Like at the same time, the off-field stuff, I was loving life. Like it was like super nice, but I hated the rugby. I've never hated the rugby more than that 1 year at Toulon.
But it showed you that you could actually have a life as well as rugby there.
So I still made me like, I was like 50-50. Well, the off-field stuff's awesome, but the on-field stuff I just really struggled with. And then, but I grew, like as the season progressed, like I just understood it different. I was like, I'm not going to complain and be like, oh, this is shit. I'm just going to try and, you know, work it out and just focus on my game and get back to just like doing what I do, which was like, okay, I need to train really hard. And because it's really easy, you could go there and you could not train. Like they don't go, we're going to do this. Like there were guys that were coming into the gym and then they'd be like, I don't want to do it today. And I was like watching them like, but we're at the gym. Like we have to do gym. Like in New Zealand, like if you don't do gym, they'll kick you out of the team. And these guys are like, no, I don't want to train today. I'm tired. And they'd go home straight after training. There'd be guys like getting in their cars, getting in their Range Rovers, like just driving off. In New Zealand, like there's at least 30 to 45 minutes of skill work after training. It's just like what you do. So I was like the only one out on the field sometimes. There was a few of us. It was just different mentality. And special with that club in particular at that time. Like it was just, it was strange club. But like at the same time, I was like, this is so surreal. I almost enjoyed the fact it was like being in a movie, like of all this weirdness that's going on. Kind of made it exciting. I don't know. Just hoping that you weren't the one like, you know, that was blamed the next loss on or something like that. But there was lots of like crazy stuff that happened that year. But like, I learned a lot that year because it put me out of my comfort zone. I had to learn a whole new way of playing rugby. Like I said, like kicking became super important. In New Zealand, kicking was like down the list of like what's important. In France, it was like number one. If you're not kicking your goals, we'll get someone else that can. If you're not, like kicking the touch was like an important thing. And in New Zealand, like if you kicked at 20 meters, like whatever, no one talks about it. It's not even talked about. In France, it was like, you need to put that ball like as far as you can because it puts more pressure on the opposite. Like that was like a really important thing. So I had to like, my whole mentality of things had to change. But loved it. Like when I look back, it was super like, lots of good stories and like lots of cool experiences. But just like the rugby was tough. And I really did hate the rugby at that time. I really didn't enjoy it.
So just touching on that, like obviously I think general public and people that haven't played sport at any sort of high level, they may look at that and go, how can you're at the pinnacle of the game, you know, playing one of the top leagues in the world for one of the biggest clubs in France, and obviously you get paid quite handsomely, so how can they can't see how a top sportsman can say they hate the sport. So how different is the realities of playing at that top level compared to what people may imagine with, you said, the Range Rovers, with playing in front of the big crowds, how much of that is sort of just a small snippet of what people do get access to see?